So good morning students. So I'll be taking the economy lectures. I've been told that certain lectures are done. Just to see that whether I'm in tune with the lectures which have been completed. So I think the topics like national income accounting, monetary policy, inflation. Now in that monetary policy, RBI is done. Yes or no? What about the banking system? Not done. I think banking system is not done, and that's why I'll be starting with the banking system. Apart from that, I think fiscal policy, FRBM Act, all those chapters, human development, 5-year plans, all those things have been done. So what I've been told that there are certain topics which are left, which are like banking system, the very important topic. Now, I think in the financial market, capital market is done, like stock market, yes or no? Now what about the money market? Money market instruments. So I'll be covering that also after the banking system. Then the chapter like poverty, unemployment, that will also be covered. But the major important areas which are very important from the mains perspective, if I talk about, that is agriculture, food security. These are the most important topics if I talk about from the mains perspective. I don't know how many of you have seen the paper also. Like if you have seen the 2023 mains paper, you would realize that this agriculture and food security plays like around 4 questions in GS paper 3 only. And it's not that it is only asked in GS paper 3. It is also asked in GS paper 1. Like this year there was a question, just to tell you one question here. See, India became, or India was once a food importer in 1960, and today India became one of the top cereal producers. Now this question was asked in GS paper 1. And do you know that the answer is nothing but simply you have to talk about the green revolution itself. We'll be seeing that, and then you will be able to connect that part. So what I'll be doing is there are certain topics which I would say are the core economy, the core economics like banking system, financial market. These topics which are left, that I'll be covering that. And then after that I'll move to the areas of sectors of economy, I would say. That is agriculture, industry, infrastructure, and at the end I'll talk about the international institutions like WTO, and these topics are also still left. So this is how we are going to proceed further. Apart from that, another very important aspect especially of my class is you need to make notes. Keep making the notes. I want you guys to make the notes about the concepts, how I am making the concepts, explaining the concept, and the layman examples which I give. That will be helpful in the revision by you only in the later time. Clear? Yes, there are certain topics which I will be dictating. There is no issue in that. I will be dictating certain areas, but apart from that I want you to keep on making notes of these topics. Okay? So let us start the topic, that is banking system. See, before we go into detail of banking system, it's very important that you have an idea, a macro idea about the different types of financial institutions which are there. And this financial institutions, if I talk about, is categorized into 2 categories. Although our lecture will be mainly focused on the banking, but before reaching to the bank, we need to know that what are the different kind of financial institutions that exist. I will divide the financial institutions mainly in 2 categories. One is banks, and this banks is further divided into 2 categories. Here again it is commercial and cooperative. Commercial and cooperative. On the other hand, apart from the banks, there are so many financial institutions. Apart from the bank, there are so many financial institutions that exist, जो आप देखते हो. So those all financial institutions apart from bank, they all come under the category of non-banking financial institutions. Like, have you heard of Exim Bank? Newspaper में Exim Bank. Now you see, this Exim Bank doesn't fall actually under this banking category. You will realize very soon that what is bank. Once I'll explain you what is bank, you will realize that okay, Exim Bank लिखा तो bank है, but it is actually not a bank. It fall under the non-banking financial institutions. Where we'll be talking about the NBFCs. You can hear the examples. You can write it down like NBFCs, non-banking finance companies. We'll be talking it at the end of our banking system. Second, all India financial institutions. All India financial institutions. Clear? Coming here to the banks, we will be talking about both types of banking, commercial and cooperative. And when I talk about the commercial, guys, see the examples. You can simply know that there are public sector banks, there are private sector banks. Now this private sector banks including foreign banks also. Clear? So including foreign banks. Apart from that, regional rural banks. So some example just for you. You can write it down. Regional rural banks, a small finance bank, payment bank. Some examples. Now let us try to go into the idea of bank. Can anyone tell me, like, what do you think about the bank? Tell me, what is a bank? Or what does bank do? What does bank do? भैया आप लोग क्या करते हो? Sorry? Yes. So bank actually, if I actually talk about, bank has two core functions. You can put a heading like meaning of bank. You can put a heading and then you try to understand the concept. See, bank has actually two core functions I'm talking about. One is mobilization of deposits. Mobilization of deposits. That means the mobilization of deposits from the population which have surplus money. Like we guys, suppose if we want to save our money, we generally put the money in the bank. And what we get on behind of that, on the back for against that, we get an interest. Yes or no? Now you tell me, if any bank gives you higher interest rate, will you deposit more or will you deposit less? More. So that means that bank have to offer high deposit rate to mobilize the deposits. And these deposits is nothing. These deposits, tell me, is it a liability on the bank or is it asset of the bank? Liability. Why? I am pretty sure that this asset liability concept is clear already. So this deposit is liability on the bank because it has to be repaid back. So this in bracket, just I am writing it down, liability, and certain other concepts. Let me ask before I proceed further. How many types of deposits you guys have studied? How many types of deposits? There are two majorly type of deposits. Demand deposits and very good. Clear? I am pretty sure that you must be aware of the difference between demand deposits and time deposits. Demand deposits are those deposits which can be withdrawn on demand. Just like you withdraw the money from the nearby ATM, or you go to the bank and say that, okay, give my money back. This is demand deposits. Like savings account, current account. Savings account, current account, these are the examples of demand deposit. On the other hand, fixed deposits are those deposits which cannot be reclaimed till the time of maturity. That means it can be withdrawn at the end of the maturity. अगर आपने एक FD account खुलवाया है, you can withdraw the money only after 3 years, 4 years, whatever that you have agreed for. That is known as time deposits. That means time means that it can be withdrawn only after a particular time. But both are part of deposits and both are liability on the bank. Again, I am telling you this part. Clear? Now, this bank, as I told you, needs capital so that it can perform its another core function. And what is that other core function is loans, undertaking lending. Undertaking lending. So bank, as I told you, has two core functions. One is mobilization of deposits, and this mobilization of deposits will generate more capital available with the bank, and more the capital available with the bank, more will be the lending. That is the second core function. Clear? But now just tell me that this loans which is given to the people, will it come under the assets or liability? Why assets? Because asset is something which is generating a return. Asset is something which is generating a return. So this is liability, this is an asset. Now you try to understand, see, this bank is mobilizing the deposit at this rate. What do you mean at this rate? So can't I say that this is the cost of collecting funds? Can't I say that this is the cost of collecting funds from the people? This is the cost which the bank is incurring, yes or no? This is the cost which the bank is incurring. क्योंकि मुझे अगर 100 rupees, if I have mobilized, I have to give 6% interest to these people. The people are not foolish enough that they will be putting the money in the bank without any interest rate. I am pretty sure no one is that foolish right now. So thereby the bank has to give them the interest, which means this deposit rate is nothing but simply the cost of collecting the funds or mobilizing the funds, yes or no? Cost of collecting the funds or mobilizing the funds. But now you tell me one more thing. The lending which has to be given, that must be given at some interest rate, people would be giving an interest rate. Will that lending rate be higher than deposit rate or lower than deposit rate? What do you think? Why? Yes, अपना profit margin कुछ होगा नहीं होगा. So you try to understand now that this, see, this is now here the concepts going to be start. This deposit rate is the initial cost of funds. After that, what happened? There is another cost which you can call it as an operational cost. भैया रन करने के लिए operational cost है क्या नहीं है? Like to run this particular class, there is a operational cost incurred here or not? Apart from that, there is some kind of profit margin because bank is not doing this as a charity. It's a financial intermediary. Now you will be understanding that bank is nothing but financial intermediary mobilizing funds from the people which have surplus money, giving to the people who is in need of funds. Giving to the people who is in need of funds. So thereby you would see the lending rate, this is known as lending rate, which will be higher than deposit rate. Lending rate will be higher than deposit rate because this is the operational cost and the profit margin that is going to bear by the bank. So thereby lending rate has to be higher than the deposit rate. Clear? अब आप मुझे एक सेकेंड चीज बताओ. Just tell me the another thing. If or suppose for banks to give more and more loans, lending rate should be lower or lending rate should be higher? Lending rate should be lower. That is what I am pretty sure in the monetary policy you must have understood that banks, if it reduces the lending rate, the borrowers, they would get the access to cheaper borrowing, and that cheaper borrowing will lead to higher borrowing, ultimately resulting in increased money supply, leading to higher economic growth. This is a simple cycle. Yes or no? But if we reduce the lending rate, now to try to understand, if we reduce the lending rate, what do you think the deposit rate will happen? What do you think will be the impact on deposit rate? Will it increase or decrease? It has to decrease. Why? See, this is fixed cost, which is very difficult to be reduced unless there are so many technological innovations and all. Yes or no? And profit margin of the banks, profit margin of the banks is already very, very low. So either they reduce the lending rate, try to understand, either they reduce the lending rate by reducing their profit margin, or they reduce the lending rate by reducing the deposit rate. Yes or no? They reduce the lending rate by reducing the deposit rate. So thereby, don't you think there exists a trade-off? If deposit rate reduce hoga, will you be depositing money in the bank? You will be like, "Arey, I would invest in stocks, mutual funds. How much is bank is going to give? Just give me only 6%, 5%. And mutual fund stocks, they are going to get me at least 12% return. Why should I invest here?" And you are reducing deposit rate further. So their objective of, try to understand their objective of collecting funds, will it not be compromised if lending rate will be reduced? If lending rate is reduced, deposit rate has to reduce. So they both move in the same line. And if deposit rate reduce, this function will be compromised. On the other hand, let us see another hand. Suppose as a bank, I increased the interest rate. As a bank, I increase the interest rate so that you guys give me more money, and you will be like, "Arey yaar, this sir is giving so high interest rate." So interest rate will be increased. But then if this cost of funds will be increased, operational cost is there, and I am not doing it for charity, I need some profit margin, don't you think there would be lending rate will also increase? Don't you think so? And if that will increase, will it not affect the lending? Yes or no? Now, why I am telling you all this thing? I don't know whether you understand this monetary policy when it comes up with a decision. You see, monetary policy in the past, now it has made this repo rate stagnant, but suppose in the last beginning of the year, RBI was continuously raising the repo rate. Try to understand. This cycle, let me make it for you. This is which is known as monetary policy transmission. This is RBI. This is bank. And this is the customers. This is known as monetary policy transmission. Monetary policy transmission. Monetary policy transmission is nothing but a process through which the decisions of the RBI is transferred to the customers through the banks. Now you try to understand that if RBI increased the repo rate, if RBI increased the repo rate, what does that mean for the bank? Tell me, one by one. Banks will get the loans to the banks from the RBI. Will it get more expensive or not? Yes or no? So that means the bank's cost of capital, will it increase or not? The bank's cost of mobilizing capital, will it increase? Yes. Now, if bank's cost of capital will increase, tell me, will it not increase the lending rate? when their cost has increased, will it not increase the lending rate? Yes. And if the lending rate will increase, tell me will the customers like to take the loan at higher interest rate? I don't think so. I don't think so. And you try to imagine this situation during the COVID period. Tell me, just as on a knowledge base, during the COVID, during a recession period, what do you think, what type of monetary policy would be undertaken, would have undertaken? What type? Like expansionary or contractionary? During the recession period, I am pretty sure you must realize that expansionary monetary policy would have been undertaken. Expansionary monetary policy means, apart from other things, that means repo rate must have declined. Yes or no? And if repo rate must have declined, the lending rate, that means the banks have cheaper source of capital. The bank will reduce the lending rate or increase the lending rate? Reduced. And thereby you must have seen at that time home loans and other loans, they were getting at like 7%, 6.5 interest rate, which is not now. If you look at the home loan rates right now and compare it with the COVID times, there were high loan rates. Sorry, there were low home loan rates at that point of time. Why? Because banks have reduced this. And if the banks have reduced the lending rate, again the purpose is to increase the money supply. If banks reduce the lending rate, so that in the economy, money supply increases. And in the economy, money supply increases, this will give a boost to the economic growth. But you compare it in the present scenario. In the present scenario, the lending rate has been increased by the banks. So this will discourage the lending, yes or no? So I hope you guys are able to understand this particular concept. Now, some observations I just want you to write so that in future you can revise. First observation is, lending rate will be higher than the deposit rate. Lending rate will be higher than the deposit rate. Clear? Second, both lending rate and deposit rate, both lending rate and deposit rate, move in the same direction, generally move in the same direction. That is higher deposit ratio or higher deposit rate will increase the cost of funds, and thus lending rate needs to increase. Thus lending rate needs to increase. Third, there exists a trade-off between lending rate and deposit rate. There exists a trade-off between lending rate and deposit rate. In bracket, banks increase deposit rate. In bracket, you write it down. Banks increase deposit rate when they have to mobilize the capital. Banks increase the deposit rate when they have to mobilize the capital. And on the other hand, banks reduce the lending rate when they have huge capital to lend. Next observation, fourth observation. You see, if I talk about this fourth observation, that is derived from the third only. tell me, if the banks have more capital, will the lending rate be higher or lower? Lower? Yes or no? Isn't it obvious? Clear? So that's the fourth observation. Higher the bank's capital, lower is the lending rate. Lower is the lending rate. And lastly, fifth, now here comes the tricky part. Just tell me, what do you think? If I talk about lending rate for longer term loans and compare the lending rate for short term loans, in which case the lending rate will be higher, for long term loans or short term? Short term loans it will be higher. Why is it so? Any logic? Suppose if you give it to me, I'll accept that part. But if you don't, so then accept my point of view. Batao. Generally we feel that lending rate for short term loan is higher. Generally. It is, I don't know why the students feel, why everyone feels, but if you compare the lending rate of the banks and the logic which I am going to give you, you realize that lending rate for long term will be higher. See, lending rate, it is determined based on the risk or not. First of all, I am pretty sure you must be getting this. See, suppose if she goes to the bank and I go to a particular bank, now, and the bank has to give the loan, don't you think the lending rate which the bank will be offering to me and her will be different? It is not going to be same. It is based on the risk, that is how much risk the bank is taking to give a loan to her and to me. If I am able to repay it very nicely or very fast, whatever, the lending rate for me will be short because the risk will be less. Like if I talk about lending rate for long term loans, just try to understand in a very layman concept. Suppose we guys here, one of you suppose asked me that, sir, please borrow me 1 lakh rupees. Please give it to me 1 lakh rupees. And I am like, okay, chalo, take this 1 lakh. Now I know you guys are here mainly for an year. Clear? So it is very easy and I know that, okay, you will be able to repay me back. You are not going anywhere as such in this 1 year. Clear? But on the other hand, if you said that, sir, I'll be giving you back this money after 10 years or 20 years. One is, don't you think the risk which I am going to bear after giving the loan to you, don't you think it is going to increase? I don't know where will you be. I don't know where you will be contacting me or not, like that. Very another important point you can think of, that suppose, I don't know, suppose to whom I have given a loan, that person might not be here also. In the long term, I don't know whether some diseases have been infected to that person and he might be in heaven. So risk, don't you think associated with the long term is more? Yes. And when the risk is higher, the very simple concept, higher the risk, higher the reward. That goes to the financial system. Every part you are going to see, higher the risk, higher the reward. If the bank is willing to undertake higher risk, that means the bank is going to get higher reward. They are going to charge higher lending rate. So lending rate for long term loans is higher than lending rate for short term loans. Clear? So you can write down this point also. Fifth one. Yes. Sorry? Yes. Yes, definitely. Now you see, why is it so? Lending rate, one more thing. Again, I told you, lending rate is not going to be same neither for each customer, neither for different, you can say, purposes. It is going to be different for different person and for different purposes. Now, he is like that, suppose lending rate for home loan, you will definitely find it is much lesser than lending rate for credit card. Credit card ka lending rate is around 35% interest rate they charge. Can you tell me why is it so? Why? In which case, first of all, you tell me risk is higher. Why is it so? Why do you think that the risk is higher in that part, credit card? Why? Yes. Home loan mein we are building an asset. The bank is like, okay, let's take this house. Home loan mein the bank knows that, okay, this person has put the money in the house. If he is unable to repay the loan, he has the option to take this risk. Like he has the option to take that house. बट इन द क्रेडिट कार्ड तुमने जो भैया कर लिया, एसी कंज्यूम कर लिया तो कर लिया ना, तुमने जो पार्टीज करनी थी कर ली. Yes or no? So in that it is not possible. That's why. So you will just understand that lending rate idea, or I would say not lending rate, that concept of risk and reward, which is applicable to each, I would say, asset, or not just only asset, wherever you see the financials, risk and reward. Higher the risk, higher the reward. That is a very simple concept. In this case, bank, in the context of bank, we were talking about the risk which they are of, like, which they are taking by giving loans. The reward they would be getting is the lending rate. In the financial, suppose if in the stock market, which you guys have covered, in the stock market, if I talk about what is this risk, you can take either the money, you can put the money either in very large cap funds, large cap is a very big companies, or you can invest the money in some penny shares. Penny shares is like 2 rupees, 3 rupees, you don't know much about the company, but you feel the risk you have taken higher. If one penny company goes big, you have a higher reward also. From 2 rupees, if it goes to 20, 10 times your money has become. And a bigger company whose share has, suppose, is around 1500, what they will be doing? They will be possibly reaching to 1800, 2100. Yes or no? That is how much return? That is 30, 40%. There 10 times, 10 times means that is 1000 times. Sorry, how much percentage? So 18 by 2, 900%. And there it is 30, 40%. So it is about the risk. So it is like how much, so they devise, they have certain methods how to like take an optimum risk. आप लोगों ने भी तो अपनी जिंदगी में optimum risk लेके आओ यहाँ पे, ठीक है, based on the reward, what you seek to achieve. Clear? So this is about the basic concept of the banking which you should be very much clear of. Clear? ये इतना एक आइडिया क्लियर होना चाहिए, so that whenever I talk about कि lending rate अगर long term का ज्यादा है, you should not be confused. You should have an idea, हाँ, risk is higher, so lending rate will be higher. Clear? Now moving to the another part, that is classification of banking. You can put a heading, classification of bank. See, if I talk about Indian context, we will be classifying the banking system mainly into two categories. Sorry, fifth point. अच्छा लिखो ना, lending rate for long term loans. Keep writing also. Lending rate for long term loans. Lending rate for long term loans is more than lending rate for short term. Is more than lending rate for short term. As, just take reason भी लिख लो, as long term loans carries higher risk. As long term loan carries higher risk. Now, if I talk about the classification of banking, we will be covering it into two heads. The first classification is scheduled versus unscheduled banks. Scheduled versus non-scheduled banks. Second classification is commercial versus cooperative. Commercial versus cooperative. Clear? Now, see, any bank, let me tell you, any bank can be both, either of them and either of them. Are you getting my point? Any bank can be either of them. First of all, one has to be either scheduled or non-scheduled, and that bank can be commercial or cooperative. So that's why we have to understand the bank from both perspectives. First, if I talk about scheduled and non-scheduled, see, any bank is called scheduled bank if it is listed under second schedule. If it is listed under second schedule of RBI Act 1934. Scheduled bank means nothing but simply if it is listed in the second schedule of the RBI. That's it. Remember the act name. Sometimes they might like trick it by saying that second schedule of the Banking Regulation Act. No. Second schedule of RBI Act 1934. Clear? Now, who puts the bank in such a schedule? That is RBI. So, it's the RBI who puts the bank in the second schedule provided two following conditions are met. The two following conditions are met. Then only the RBI will be putting the bank under the second schedule, and then only it will be called as a scheduled bank. The first condition is, you can even write it down. First condition is minimum paid up capital and reserves, minimum paid up capital and reserves of an aggregate value of rupees 5 lakh. Of rupees 5 lakh. Second subcondition, it must satisfy RBI that its affairs are not conducted in a manner detrimental to the depositors. These are the following two conditions. Now you must be thinking कि सर आपको नहीं लग रहा 5 लाख की कैपेसिटी मतलब प्राइस इज वेरी लेस? Yes, that's why you guys even have the money. You can also even run a bank, but it is not necessary that you will be listed as a scheduled bank, because you have to convince the RBI that based on your operations you have like taken the money, or you have functioning the bank in the interest of the depositors. That is the second condition. If you see, that is highly subjective. Yes or no? First तो objective है, आप लोग भी बैंक बना सकते हो और होता भी है. I am pretty sure many of you must have seen in the local by na, they have formed any bank mobilizing the deposit. But all banks not necessarily have the scheduled bank status. But why I am talking about scheduled bank? What is the advantages this any tag of scheduled bank gives to a bank? What is the advantage of this tag to a bank? क्या advantage क्या है? Sorry? वो भी तो है ही है, बट उसके लिए चलो पैसा भी देना पड़ता है ना. Sorry? Yes. Now you see, there, as I told you, there are two categories of bank: scheduled, non-scheduled. Non-scheduled आपके बहुत ज़्यादा banks हैं. But scheduled bank, getting a tag of scheduled bank have several advantages, such as you must have heard this term LAF facility, liquidity adjustment, repo is a part of it. The banks can access that LAF facility of RBI, which means they can borrow the cheaper source of funds from the RBI. They are not just only reliant on the people कि यार मेरे को अगर उनका deposit मिले. Yes or no? See, you see this thing, it's very important. The bank, although it was mainly reliant on deposits, there are other sources for the bank's capital. What are the other sources? You have RBI, which can only be accessed by the scheduled bank, no one else.
Sir, so जो RBI repo rate change करेगा उसे scheduled?
Yes, तभी आप देखते नहीं हो कभी आपने, I don't know whether you have seen or not, जब भी आप RBI direction, if you open the RBI actual direction, let's leave the newspaper thing. If you open the RBI master circular, whenever they change this RBI, whenever they change the repo rate, the word comes scheduled, applicable to scheduled commercial banks. कभी भी आप देखना, this word must be always written I have not seen any circular where this scheduled word is not written. And why is it so? It's obvious, because that is applicable to the scheduled banks. Clear? So this is one very important advantages. Apart from that, you must have seen that it's okay, various bank got, you can say, like Yes Bank crisis happened, or PNB Bank crisis happened some 2-3 years back. Who came to their rescue? Who is going to give them the funds when they need it? Or who is going to come to their rescue? It is the RBI. If a non-scheduled bank goes like this, RBI doesn't worry about it. But if a scheduled bank, you know that, okay, we have someone who can ensure that we survive. At the same time, if the bank needs the money, and nobody is giving it, then in that case, the RBI can provide the funds. That's why you must have studied one of the function of RBI, lender of last resort. Yes or no? What is that? And that is only applicable to whom? Scheduled bank. So scheduled bank have advantages, there is no doubt about that. और एक टैग का एक ब्रांड नेम भी तो होता है अपने आप ही. Suppose if I want to mobilize the money from the depositors and I am like nothing, I am like non-scheduled, will I be able to mobilize money? No. Bank will be like, sorry, people will be like, why should they trust us? Why should they will be depositing money in us? We are not having name, we are not having scheduled bank, nothing like that. So even this ensures, like you can say, trust with the depositors, which help in raising the capital easily. But scheduled bank advantages के साथ आपको scheduled banks also have to follow the minimum requirements, which again you guys have studied. CRR, SLR, yes or no? Those are known as prudential requirement. तो आप ये समझो, scheduled banks are those banks which the RBI is trying to regulate in a proper, nice manner and support them whenever needed through the, you can say, repo rate, or through lending it at the last resort, through saving them from any crisis. But RBI is like, if you want to avail such advantages, you have to follow certain conditions, or you have to like comply with minimum norms. And what is that minimum norm? Follow CRR, follow SLR, follow Basel III norms. That's it. आप इतना comply करो, फिर देखो how much I'll be helping you. Yes or no? So this scheduled banks, you can like have this a table, make a table made, the advantages. ठीक है, नहीं आप लिख लो अपने हिसाब से advantages, what this tag of scheduled bank gives to the bank. One is like access LAF facility, access to LAF facility of RBI. Second, lender of last resort, lender of last resort. Third is saving it from the crisis, saving the banks from the crisis. But at the same time, the banks needs to comply, these scheduled banks, not banks, the scheduled bank needs to comply with various requirements, which you call it as prudential norms. What do you understand? Like, what do you mean by prudential norms? Prudential norms is nothing like, see, as a bank, I'm taking your money and it's a liability on me, I have to repay it back. So prudential norms just ensure that a certain part of money is kept aside in the form of reserves, which should not be used for the lending purpose. That is prudential norms, which come unlike, which are like reserve ratios, SLR, CRR, even Basel III norms. These are called as prudential norms, where the bank simply keep aside certain amount of money, take the decisions in the interest of the depositors also. Because suppose sometimes if you come and I don't have money, what will happen? Will I not lose the trust of you? Yes. That will create a panic like situation. ऐसे ही तो येस बैंक की क्राइसिस हुई थी. ठीक है. So prudential requirements, CRR, SLR, Basel III norms, etc. Now this was the first classification, that is commercial, this scheduled versus non-scheduled. The second is commercial versus cooperative. Yes.
So if lending rates are less, then the profit would be less.
Sorry?
If lending rates are less, then the profit would be less.
No, as I told you, deposit rate will also reduce. Deposit rate will also reduce. But then you would be thinking, sir, then where will the bank's money will come? Banks, that's why I told you, bank will reduce the deposit rate only and only when banks have lot of funds. And now you understand, banks, I told you, it's not just their note, only one source is not just only depositors. That is only their one source. The other money is from the RBI. The third is by listing it on the stock exchange, you are continuously getting the money from there also. So now it is not just only one source. But even after that, if the lending rate decrease, deposit rate will decrease. So it's like जैसे आप देखो, simple है, आपको अभी जो objective है, there are so many subjects you have to study, but if you have to study economy right now, you have to study. Yes or no? तो बाकी subjects का time अपने आप चला गया. In the same way, if the bank has to achieve the objective of giving more loans, they have to reduce that lending rate. But if the banks don't have capital and is like, okay, let me take the money. So then they will be increasing the deposit rate. That function will be compromised. So it is about which have to be done. Like which needs to be done. This is what economy is, honestly. Economy is nothing by making a decision among various trade-off. क्योंकि trade-off तो होना ही होना है. आप लोगों में भी होता है, आपने कौन सा सब्जेक्ट पढ़े है ना, किस टाइम पे पढ़े, और यू स्टडी और यू रोम अराउंड. क्लियर? मॉर्निंग में इंडिया गेट जाए, मॉर्निंग में पढ़े. सो देयर आर सो मेनी थिंग्स. सो ये इकोनॉमी, दिस इज इकोनॉमी ओनली. अगर हमारा, वी डोंट हैव टू स्टडी इकोनॉमी इफ वी डोंट हैव टू टेक डिसीजंस. अब अगर हमें डिसीजन नहीं लेना, हम इकोनॉमी पढ़ते ही नहीं. इकोनॉमी वुड नॉट हैव एग्जिस्टेड, बट इट एग्जिस्ट बिकॉज देयर आर स्कार्स रिसोर्सेस, and these scarce resources make us to take choice among the alternatives. अब आप ये तो हो नहीं कि आप 2020 आप 2030 की तैयारी कर रहे हो, तब एक अलग बात है. You have various, now you can explore all the options, but you guys are preparing for the 2024 or 2025, for which you have limited time. So thereby you need to make choices. Clear? Moving to the second category of bank, that is commercial versus cooperative. Very simple thing. See, commercial is what? Simply, the bank is called commercial. They are undertaking the functions with a sole profit motive. Yes or no? They are undertaking the functions with a sole profit motive. Profit motive. So whatever we have seen, they are simply putting the lending rate and the deposit rate, keeping in line in such a way that they maximize their profit. But if I talk about the cooperative, guys, see, try to understand, cooperative is a concept first of all. Cooperative a concept है which can be applied in any sector. Cooperative क्या है? It's nothing like we all people coming together and undertaking that particular activity together. That is known as cooperative. ठीक है, पॉलिटी में कॉपरेटिव्स देखा होगा कुछ. कॉपरेटिव इज नॉट, अगेन आई एम टेलिंग यू, कॉपरेटिव्स एक सिंपल कंसेप्ट है. कॉपरेटिव जैसे मिल्क कॉपरेटिव्स, आपने अमूल क्या है? मिल्क कॉपरेटिव्स है ना. फार्मर्स दे आर कमिंग टुगेदर, परचेजिंग द इनपुट्स टुगेदर एंड देन गिविंग देयर प्रोड्यूस टू द हायर पर्सन, कि वो कलेक्ट कर रहा है उस रीजन की, एंड देन ऐसे रीजन्स का करते करते दे आर अगेन गिविंग टू द अनदर हायर लेवल पर्सन. सो दिस इज नोन एज कलेक्टिवाइजेशन, और यू कैन से कोऑपरेटिव फार्मिंग, और लाइक कोऑपरेटिव फार्मिंग एग्रीकल्चर में हो गया. इसमें कोऑपरेटिव मिल्क प्रोडक्शन. इट्स नॉट लाइक ए स्मॉल फार्मर गोइंग टू द मार्केट एंड सेलिंग इट अलोन. नो, cooperative is a concept where the people are voluntarily coming together and participating in the production distribution thing. So if I talk about cooperative bank, it is composed of two things. One, a concept of cooperative plus, because it is applied now, this concept is applied in the banking system. So this cooperatives, that means the people are coming together, understand, people are coming together, pooling their money and creating a bank, giving loans to the people who need among them. Suppose agar we 60-70 people came together and give our contribution whatever we have and we created a bank. और scheduled bank बनाने के लिए हमें चाहिए क्या 5 लाख ही तो चाहिए, yes or no? So basically suppose if we create a cooperative bank, we came together and now out of that suppose one person he needs money, he's a part of our group, he needs money, we as a cooperative bank give money to him within that interest rate where our motive is not profit. Our motive is not profit, just to support them so that he is like whatever activity he undertakes, get out of poverty and give back the money. No profit motive. It is like voluntary coming together with a intention of support. Understanding? So we all, now try to understand here, we all who have come together, even he has been a part of it. जब हम लोगों ने साथ में मिलके एक बैंक बनाया, we will be the shareholders of that bank or not? Yes, we will be the shareholders according to the contribution, but we will be the shareholders. Now I am giving money to that, suppose this we as a cooperative bank giving money to that person, he is a shareholder, but at the same time he is a customer or not, क्योंकि हमने उसको लोन दिया. So in the cooperative bank, don't you think shareholder is a customer? Yes. Try to understand, unlike the commercial bank किसी और ने ओपन किया है, we have gone there as a customer, but their shareholders will be different, yes or no? But in the cooperative bank we are coming together contributing to create a bank, and once we are contributing we become members, or we can call it as shareholders of a bank. We are the owners of cooperative bank. And out of that, one person or 2 person, 3 person, whoever needs the money, the loan will be given to that person. Now that person which was already a shareholder has now become a customer also. So in the cooperative bank, customers are the shareholders also, unlike this. I'll dictate this part, so don't worry, try to understand this thing first. Okay? Coming to one more other very important last part, see, cooperative bank, I told you it is composed of cooperative and bank. Now this cooperative, see now here comes your polity concept. Cooperative come under which list of the 7th schedule? State list. Clear? So cooperative come under list 2 as a concept I told you, which can be used like can be applied anywhere. List 2 of 7th schedule, which is known as state list. Clear? But banking, who is the regulator of banking? RBI. So here the banking is like regulated by the RBI under the Banking Regulation Act 1949. Clear? Commercial banks से भी लिख लेना, commercial banks regulated by the RBI through its Banking Regulation Act. मेजर एक्ट ये है, बाकी तो छोटी मोटी और भी. Banking Regulation Act 1949. Now see, now you try to understand more. Commercial banks, simply these are commercial banks regulated by the RBI. There is a single regulation because it only undertakes banking functions, and the banking functions का regulator होता है RBI. But if I talk about cooperative bank is composed of cooperative plus banking. If I talk about cooperative, which is under list 2 of state, sorry, that is 7th schedule, that means the power to regulate cooperative lies with whom? State government. The power to regulate cooperative lies with the state government. But on the other hand, the power to regulate banking lies with whom? RBI. That is why you must have heard that cooperative banks face dual regulation. That's why it is called dual regulation. Cooperative banks face dual regulation, regulated by state government and RBI. Here, if I elaborate this aspect, state government, each state government have made their different laws. Each state government have made different laws governing the cooperatives. Different laws governing the cooperatives. क्योंकि अपना है भैया, हम कुछ भी बना सकते हैं, और that is under the state list. Clear? On the other hand, एक specific, just in case if it is asked, there is a specific society or you can say registrar of cooperative society that is responsible under the state government for regulating the cooperatives. Specifically, if someone asks which body, so RCS is Registrar of Cooperative Society, is responsible for regulating the cooperatives. Not only banking but cooperatives. RCS. ठीक है? Registrar, REGISTRA, Registrar of Cooperative Societies. Clear? ड्वेल रेगुलेशन, अब आप बताओ, अब हम आगे यहां पे बात करते हैं. सॉरी, नहीं, अब देखो, चलो अब देखो ना, हम यहां तक पहुंच गए दैट कॉपरेटिव्स आर सब्जेक्ट टू, वेलकम टू योर पार्ट लेटर, कॉपरेटिव आर सब्जेक्ट टू ड्वेल रेगुलेशन. ड्वेल रेगुलेशन में नाउ देयर आर टू थिंग्स. कॉपरेटिव एक होता है फॉर्मेशन. फॉर्मेशन में क्या क्या आता है, उसके कितने नंबर्स होंगे, मेंबर्स कितने होंगे, इलेक्शन, हाउ द चेयरमैन विल बी इलेक्टेड. सो वन सेट ऑफ रेगुलेशन लाइज विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू, यू कैन से मेकिंग स्ट्रक्चरिंग, स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ अ कोऑपरेटिव, कि भैया मेरा स्ट्रक्चर में इलेक्शन कैसे होगा, मेंबर्स कैसे होगा. एंड सेकेंड फंक्शन इज, मेजर फंक्शन इज दैट बैंकिंग. सो जो आरसीएस है इन दिस केस, they regulate that structure part, conducting the election, number of members, election of chairman, how all this thing will be done, that is regulated by the RCS. On the other hand, banking aspects is undertaken by the RBI. But आप मुझे एक बात बताओ, see, what do you think this dual regulation, will it be good for the cooperatives? आपने आई डोंट, अभी आप ना सी यू हैव स्टार्टेड, सो यू सी व्हेनेवर यू विल बी सीइंग सो मेनी न्यूज कमिंग अप, और बैंकिंग क्राइसिस देखोगे, कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स दे विटनेस अ हाईएस्ट नंबर ऑफ क्राइसिस, कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स. एंड वन ऑफ द मेजर रीजन, ऑल्दो देयर आर मेनी, बट वन ऑफ द मेजर रीजन इज दिस, द ड्वेल रेगुलेशन. दिस ड्वेल रेगुलेशन हैज एक्चुअली लीड टू प्रॉब्लम. अब ड्वेल रेगुलेशन में होता क्या है, बैंक्स को लगेगा दैट ओके, सपोज जैसे इलेक्शन की बात करते हैं, लेट अस सी, लेट मी गिव यू वन एग्जांपल ऑफ माय नियर बाय लाइक डिस्ट्रिक्ट ओनली. जनरली आपने, आई डोंट नो वेदर यू हैव विटनेस्ड, इलेक्शंस अगर आप कभी देखोगे ना किसी कोऑपरेटिव बैंक का, हाईली पॉलिटिसाइज्ड, हाईली इन्वॉल्व्ड, यू कैन से द यूज ऑफ स्टेट गवर्नमेंट मशीनरी. सो देयर बाय व्हाट हैपेंस हियर, अब यहां पे आपने अपॉइंट कर लिया मेनली फेवरेटिज्म टाइप के पीपल, mainly favoritism type के people who will be taking decisions to whom the loan should be given, to whom the loan should not be given. Although banking related aspects are undertaken by the RBI, but loan तो यही decide कर रहे हैं किसको देना है किसको नहीं देना है, and which is nothing but comprises of, you can say, I would say politically people, but more than that I would say they are not, I would say this related to this field, the banking field. They are not banking experts. They are more of political people. So because of which what happened, they are not able to decide the loan correctly, that where should be given the loan, where it should not be. And ultimately what happened, the loans, if you have not assessed, if you have not judged the credit worthiness, कि यार सामने वाले को मैंने लोन दे दिया but मैंने credit risk जज ही नहीं किया, that whether that person will be able to repay me the loan or not. But just because someone told me and I have given the 400 crore, 500 crore, दे दिया, ले लो. Then what will happen? The loan will not come back. And if the loan will not come back, people's money will go. जो people's का deposit है, that hard earned money, गया वो. तो dual regulation is actually, I would say, worse than no regulation. Clear? And that's why इसका change क्या हुआ, अभी मैं आपको एक और बात बताऊंगा, that urban cooperative banks have been brought under the regulation of RBI. But before that, you should know the structure of cooperative. कि cooperative banks is it is classified like rural, urban करके, वो structure एक बार clear होना चाहिए, ठीक है? So but write it down some points about cooperatives, 2-3 points. About cooperative banks, you write it down. Cooperative banks were born out of the concept of cooperative credit societies. Cooperative banks were born out of the concept of cooperative credit societies where members from a community grouped together to extend loans to each other. Grouped together to extend loans to each other at favorable terms. Next point. These are customer owned entities. These are customer owned entities where cooperative bank members are both customers and owners of the bank. Where cooperative banks members are both owners and customers of the bank. In bracket you write it down. Differs from the commercial banks. ठीक है, bracket close. I hope that will is understandable to you. ठीक है, bracket differs from the commercial banks. Next point. Members of the cooperative banks have equal voting rights. In bracket, one person, one vote. Next, last one more point. Cooperative banks mainly focus on agricultural and rural sector lending. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट आपको ना ये स्ट्रक्चर बनाना है, स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स. इट इज एक्चुअली यूजफुल इन एग्रीकल्चर, बट आप अभी बना लो. स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स. I'll divide this into two categories. One is rural cooperative banks and another is urban cooperative banks. Clear? This rural cooperative bank, I'll be further dividing it into two types. This rural cooperative bank, I'll be further dividing it into two types. One is short term, another is long term. ठीक है, शॉर्ट टर्म के नीचे मैं आपको कुछ लिखवाऊंगा. अनदर इज लॉन्ग टर्म लोन्स. सो बेसिकली कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स कैन बी क्लासिफाइड इनटू टू कैटेगरी. वन इज रूरल कोऑपरेटिव्स एंड अनदर इज अर्बन कोऑपरेटिव्स. क्लियर? तो आपने जो अर्बन कोऑपरेटिव्स का आपने सुना होगा, अर्बन कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स, यू गाइस मस्ट हैव heard of this term. But then there are rural cooperatives which is further classified into two types, short term and long term loans. Clear? If I talk about short term, so write it down here. One is PACS, Primary Agricultural Credit Societies, PACS, Primary Agricultural Credit Societies at village level. In bracket लिख लेना, at village level, Primary Agricultural Credit Societies in bracket at village level. Second, district central cooperative banks. District central cooperative banks. And third is state cooperative banks. Third is state cooperative banks. Clear? Long term mein basically, so this is called as 3-tier structure. That rural cooperatives is mainly having a 3-tier structure for providing short term loans. For long term loans, need तो नहीं है इसकी, but still now इतना लिख लिया तो ये भी लिख लो. First sub point, state cooperative agricultural and rural development banks. State cooperative agricultural and rural development banks. State cooperative agricultural and rural development banks. Second sub point, primary cooperative agricultural and rural development banks. Primary cooperative and agricultural rural development banks. Clear? तो एक छोटा सा स्ट्रक्चर है. Now here the last point which I wanted to talk about was, see, I highlighted the issue of dual regulation in the cooperative banks. Now this dual regulation has led to many cooperative banks, especially if I talk about urban cooperative banks, to perish. So thereby, through the Banking Regulation Amendment Act 2020, the government has put the ultimate control of the urban cooperative banks to the RBI. Are you understanding? So ultimate control जो अब है, although it is also regulated by RBI like the state government, but the ultimate control of the urban cooperative banks have now shifted to the RBI through the Banking Regulation Amendment Act 2020. जो पहले नहीं था, पहले क्या दोनों अपने अपने काम को देख रहे थे, लेकिन कौन किसका डिसीजन है, इसका अपना रोल है, इसका अपना रोल है. बट अब ऐसा नहीं है. Ultimate control. Suppose if RBI thinks that the state government is doing it not properly in line with the banking system, they can overtake the decision. Clear? So this line you could write it down like urban cooperative banks came under the ultimate control of RBI, through the Banking Regulation Amendment Act 2020. Through the Banking Regulation Amendment Act 2020. ठीक है. चलो, next is evolution of banking system. I'm pretty sure you guys must have heard of different types of banks. कितने types of सुन चुके हो banks के? Yes, tell me. अच्छा, okay, so there are, see, just try to understand here. See, if I am talking about urban cooperative banks either they would be operating in single state, or multi-state. Multi-state means, so now you would be realizing that, sir, can any cooperative bank operates in multiple state? Yes. Any cooperative bank can also operate, especially the urban cooperative, rural तो नहीं होता है, urban cooperative. Either they will be operating in a single state or in a multiple state, which we call it as multi-state cooperative banks. Now the next question comes, sir, I can understand that if they are operating in a single state, sir, they would be facing dual regulation out of which, sir, one agency is RCS and another is RBI. Yes or no? And sir, you have told me now through the 2020 Act, RBI have the ultimate control. Yes or no? Sir, itna to main samajh gaya. But what about the multi-state? So first of all, you should have that thing in mind that urban cooperative banks can operate in multiple states. It should not be that only the single state. It's not like that only it can operate only in one state. It can operate in multiple states. But then the issue comes, sir, cooperative banks, so you have told it will be operated by state laws. And when it is operated by state laws, so different states, will they be operating, like will they be regulating the cooperatives through their own laws? Will it be feasible? No. Are you getting my point? If cooperative banks are operating in multiple state में, and cooperatives are regulated by the state laws, तो ये जो मल्टी स्टेट कोऑपरेटिव बैंक्स हैं, will it be regulated by different state laws? Tell me, will it be regulated by different state laws? No. So then who will be regulating it? No, there will be again dual regulation. Sorry? Dual regulation, there is no doubt about that. And one of, obviously there is RBI, but second one is central. There is also Central Registrar of Cooperative Societies, CRCS. So that means in the case of multi-state cooperative banks, it is the Central Registrar of Cooperative State that will be regulating. Are you getting my point? Now, it is the Central Registrar of Cooperative Societies. Basically, so one side of regulation which was done by the state government, now it is going to be taken over by the central government. But अब एक और क्वेश्चन आता है कि sir, this urban cooperative banks which you have said that this will now have come under the ultimate control of RBI. Sir, is it applicable to the multi-state cooperative? Yes. Yes. So that Banking Regulation Amendment Act which I talked about 2020, which gave ultimate power to the RBI so that the problem of dual regulation can be addressed. That applies to single state cooperative urban cooperative banks, multi-state urban cooperative banks, but it does not apply to PACs. It does not apply to PACs. It applies to single state. That means it applies to only and only urban cooperative banks. That act which gives or which transfers the ultimate power to them. तो इनका क्या रोल हो गया? इनका काम ये हो गया कि ठीक है आप बेसिकली इलेक्शन करवाओ, बट इफ आई फील दैट योर डिसीजन इज नॉट गुड, आई हैव द पावर टू ओवरटेक योर डिसीजन, टू ओवरराइड योर डिसीजन, सॉरी, ठीक है, आई हैव द पावर. तो एक हिरार्की टाइप से क्रिएट हो गई, दो इक्वल लोग हैं, डिसीजन कभी हो ही नहीं पाएगा प्रॉपर, आरबीआई को ऊपर रख दिया, दैट्स इट. ठीक है, सो फॉर बोथ. अब एक पॉलिटिकली आपके लिए एक वो है, देखो, दिस I'll not be discussing, but I'm telling you, I think in 2023 or 2022 last year, I don't know, remember the exact year, Supreme Court struck down the 97th Constitutional Amendment Act. 97th Constitutional Amendment Act किससे related है? Cooperative से. So read about that. It struck down that, ठीक है, and saying who gave you the power to regulate a law on the cooperatives? Supreme Court was like, who gave you the power to come up with constitutional amendment and give a law on the cooperative? That power is available to whom? State list. So RBI struck down, sorry, not RBI, Supreme Court is struck down except about the laws which are applicable to multi-state cooperative, which is fine क्योंकि multi-state का regulation center करते हैं. तो इसके बारे में यू कैन रीड इट मोर अबाउट दैट, बट है तो वही न्यूज, बट बेसिक कंसेप्ट शुड बी वेरी क्लियर टू यू. द बेसिक कंसेप्ट इज दिस, कोऑपरेटिव्स. उसके बाद जो होता है ना वो न्यूज आइटम है, which is like just can help you in refreshing your concept, but this is the base item that you should be remembering it with respect to the all cooperatives and all. ठीक है, तो फिर भी आप देखना एक बार. Now we were talking about evolution of banking, basically not about evolution, more about the different types of bank you guys hear right today in the present time, but उसको एक timeline format में दे रहा हूँ so that you remember it for a longer period of time. Evolution of banking system. Starting with, you just make a timeline like this first of all. Starting with 1904, establishment of is it visible? No? Establishment of cooperative institutions. (1935) creation of or establishment of RBI. (1949) nationalization of RBI. Then we have 1955 establishment of SBI. Then we have 1969. There are 2-3 important things that happened in 1969. Nationalization, yes or no? How many banks? 14. Nationalization of 14 major private banks. Second, lead bank scheme got launched here in 1969. Third is kind of priority sector lending was given a push, although it got formalized in 1972. I'll talk about that later, but priority sector lending got a push here in 1969. ठीक है. Then we have 1975 establishment of RRB, that is RRB Act was passed. Clear? Then we have 1980 again nationalization. Clear? So here you can write 1975 or 76. ठीक है. Nationalization of again 6 major banks. ठीक है. Then we have 1982. 1982 is creation of NABARD. Not as such important for us, but right now this I'll be talking about NABARD in the agriculture. Then 1991, I'll be giving you some idea about the impact of economic reforms. 1991 LPG reforms. This though I'm pretty sure you guys must have covered in the planning part. LPG reforms, कुछ idea होगा basic. Then is 2013. I have no space left, but 2013 you can write it down like 2013 actually 2015, sorry. Small Finance Bank and Payment Bank. 2015 Small Finance Bank and Payment Bank. And then in the present time, write it down, neo banks, NEO, कुछ वो भी सुने होंगे आपने, डिजिटल बैंकिंग यूनिट्स. ठीक है. और बताओ इसके अलावा कोई बैंक आप लोगों ने सुना हो? So why I am talking about all these things? See, this after the completion of this part, our first major part of banking will be covered. Basically banking, I cover it in 3 parts. First major part is about understanding about the banks and their different types. This is one area. If a question on banking is asked, this is one area where definitely one question would be asked. अब देखो, अब मैं आपको बताऊं, RBI से क्वेश्चन तो बहुत बार पूछा है भी, ठीक है, but although that we have like studied separately, cooperative से which we have studied, question from cooperative has been asked, question from lead bank has been asked, RRB has not been asked as of now, then small finance bank, payment bank, दोनों से पूछ चुके. And again, it's not like they have asked just one time, it's like number of times. So this is one part. Second part of the banking system which we'll be covering tomorrow, that is about working of a bank. This is like understanding a bank working में PSL, जो आपका minimum lending rate, Basel norms, provisioning coverage ratio, all that would be covered in the next. And third is you can say the NPA. जो हम जो NPA पढ़ोगे, तो I'll be talking about the various measures to deal with NPA. Again, that I'll be talking about in the timeline based approach. और इन तीनों में से there used to be a time when high number of questions were being asked from the banking. High number. ठीक है, वो तो अब चलो रिसेंटली 1-2 साल में ऐसा हो गया. अदरवाइज ये तीनों मिला के, 3 पार्ट मिला के 4-5 क्वेश्चंस वर जनरली आस्क्ड. ठीक है. So see, let us start with understanding this thing. This timeline is important. I'll be dictating only certain parts which we have not covered. See, the first part is the cooperative institutions. If I talk about the formal banking, it actually started from the 1904 only. There was the enactment of Cooperative Credit Societies Act 1904. With that, the cooperative institution started to take roots in our country. With that, cooperative institution started to take roots in our country from that year onwards. But you see, slowly cooperative system was gaining, but it was not like too much, you can say, impacted the banking system. Nothing like that. It was not like that it too much impacted. That means still the people at that time were more reliant on the informal loans. आप लोगों ने, चलो मैं आपसे टकावी लोन सुने वैसे, कभी टकावी लोन्स हिस्ट्री में कब लॉन्च हुए थे? So this Takavi loans and all these things, these were kind of small you can say loans which is given by the government. एक छोटी सी हिस्ट्री बताती है एक फॉर्मल इंस्टीट्यूशंस की, बट एक्चुअली इट स्टार्टेड फ्रॉम द 1904 से. नाउ कोऑपरेटिव इंस्टीट्यूशंस वी हैव कवर्ड, सो आई विल नॉट बी डिस्कसिंग दिस टाइप ऑफ बैंक राइट नाउ. Slowly, then 1935 RBI was created. Now RBI, I am pretty sure you guys must know when it was created as a private shareholder bank. Yes or no? It was not a government bank, it was a private shareholder bank. Clear? But in 1949 it got nationalized. And when I say nationalized, it means it is 100% owned by the government of India. 100% owned by the government of India. Now here I want to make a difference or distinguish between nationalization and acquisition. What is the difference between these two terms, nationalization and acquisition? Batao.
Acquisition is buying majority shares in that.
And nationalization?
Completely.
Not necessary. Acquisition? And nationalization में नहीं. और बताओ. हाँ? Who told you? कहाँ लिखा है nationalization का constitution में? Tell me which article? फिर? वो तो उन्होंने भी वही बोला ना. नहीं मतलब सब में जो, हाँ? नहीं देखो. I think luckily उस time पे, I think this was a time of 3-4 years back when I was talking about the same chapter. Clear? And generally ये तो बस ना ऐसे पूछने के लिए I asked to my students about the difference between nationalization and acquisition. अब हुआ क्या, उसी टाइम पे उसके इंटरव्यू में क्वेश्चन पूछ लिया. He was the economics, no, he was from economics background एंड उसके इंटरव्यू में पूछ लिया 2022 50 इयर्स कंप्लीट हुए थे, नहीं सॉरी 2019 50 इयर्स कंप्लीट हुए थे नेशनलाइजेशन के. सो एट दैट टाइम इन हिज इंटरव्यू इट वाज आस्क्ड कि वो नेशनलाइजेशन हुआ, नाउ व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन नेशनलाइजेशन एंड एक्विजिशन. सो आई स्टिल रिमेंबर, उसके बाद से तो मैं कंटिन्यूअसली हर बार पूछता ही हूं कि लकीली यार मतलब वो चीज ऐसे जस्ट पूछी और उससे पूछ ली गई. द डिफरेंस बिटवीन नेशनलाइजेशन एंड एक्विजिशन, सी whenever the government is nationalizing, that means it is completely owning that. There's no doubt about that. Completely government is taking, or you can say acquiring. But when we use the word nationalization, it is acquiring the shares of the company, it is acquiring the company at their own rate, not the market rate. On the other hand, if I talk about acquisition, which can be undertaken by any of us, it can be, it has to be at the market rate. This is the major difference between nationalization and acquisition. Nationalization again, it is done by whom? By the government. That's why you're nationalizing. और कहीं भी वर्ड अगर नेशनलाइजेशन है, अरे तुम्हारी कंपनी की सपोज वैल्यूएशन 100 करोड़, बट गवर्नमेंट इज सेइंग नेशनलाइजिंग योर कंपनी, दे आर जस्ट सेइंग यू टेक 15 करोड़ एंड गिव मी योर 100%. On the other hand, as a private sector, if I come to you and I want to acquire your company, you are like, my company's valuation is 100 CR, let's negotiate and close the deal at 90 crore. Still I offer you at a market rate or not. But government, when it says, when it use the word nationalization, it means they are not using, or they are not giving the market rate to the other party. That is the main difference. Apart from that, all other things are same itself. Clear? So हम जब बात करते हैं nationalization जब हुआ RBI का, it was like 100% now owned by the RBI. And now you can understand today if I say who is the owner of the RBI? Government. अब आप मुझे एक बात बताओ, मैं अगर किसी कंपनी का ओनर हूंगा 100%, उस कंपनी के प्रॉफिट्स, who is like having the authority or who is having the, you can say कि किसके पास वो प्रॉफिट्स जाने चाहिए? गवर्नमेंट. या अगर मैं किसी कंपनी को, तो मेरे पैसे आने चाहिए. Run you might be taking, other party might be running it, they might be incurring operational expenses, but the profit should go to the owner. Now when you say that when the RBI is making profits, if RBI is making profits, that money should go to whom? Government. And that money which is transferred by the RBI to the government, that is known as RBI dividend. जो आपने सुना होगा आपने RBI dividend में. Yes or no? That money which is transferred by the RBI to the government every year in the form of RBI dividend. Now the next question is, how does RBI make profit? Through? Yes. So I'm pretty sure you guys must have covered this aspect, assets, liabilities of RBI and the profits it make and undertaking commission fees and all. Yes or no? So this part must have been learned to you and I'm pretty sure कि आप लोग को क्लियर होगा कि ये जो RBI dividend है, that this RBI should be giving the transfers to the government and this is 100 because it is 100% owned. ठीक है, चलो कोई बात नहीं. अब आपसे ना कई बार ये भी पूछा जाता है, फर्स्ट ये चलो आप लोग के लिए यूपीएससी में, लेकिन बाकी में नबार्ड एंड अदर एग्जामिनेशंस में, कि फर्स्ट बैंक टू बी नेशनलाइज्ड is generally we say it RBI, but first commercial bank to be nationalized was actually SBI. Basically the nationalization, SBI was created through the nationalization of various imperial banks of that time. Pre-independence से पहले कुछ nationalization था, nationalized imperial banks थे, so those banks were nationalized. Clear? चलो तो यहां पे SBI में कुछ points लिख लो एक दो. अच्छा, this RBI 1935 was constituted based on the recommendations of which commission? Hilton Young Commission. ठीक है, एक और पॉइंट पूछ लेता हूं लास्ट, so that I get an idea that you remember this RBI. See, RBI consists of a central board of directors. Yes or no? Now this central board of director comprises of two categories of director. One is official, one is non-official. Official यही होता है एक governor and 4 deputy governors. Now this governor, this official directors are appointed by whom? Which body? Select committee तो बहुत सारी होती है, लेकिन क्या है, so simply ये लाइन भी ना इससे आ सकती भी है और रिमूवल की आ चुकी है, अब अपॉइंटमेंट की आ जाए. Simply official directors they are appointed by the government of India. Clear? These official directors are appointed by the government of India. ठीक है? Now write it down about State Bank. State Bank of India 1955 came into existence after the nationalization of Imperial Bank of India. After the nationalization of Imperial Bank of India. ठीक है? Next part is 1969. So अब आप देखो, try to understand now, till here from 1904 till 1955 you can say, these were 50 years, almost 50 years of cooperative institutions before the enactment of SBI Act. अच्छा यहाँ पे एक लिख लेना कि there was an SBI Act got passed, no? This SBI was created through an act. I don't know whether it was asked, no, it can be, but this is some information. SBI was like created through an act. Now you see, in 50 years, cooperative institutions were the only formal institutions that were running. Yes or no? अब आप मुझे ये बताओ, सिर्फ cooperative जो 50 years है, what do you think that its share in the total credit would be? मतलब अगर formal credit और informal credit की बात की जाए, I hope you guys are clear about formal, informal. What is formal credit? The formal credit, the loan which is taken from the formal institutions like banks. Clear? On the other hand, informal credit is the loan which is taken from the informal sources such as money lenders, friends, relatives, like that. Clear? अब जब formal institutions में loan क्यों लेना चाहते हैं? Why the people should take the loan from the formal institutions? Because interest rate is less. The terms and conditions, they are defined. Well defined terms and conditions कि यार ये है. Money lender can change the terms and conditions. Clear? Plus second, another important point, interest rates are low. That is why the formal institutions have to be, like we say that the government should push for formal financial inclusion. Why they are trying for financial inclusion? So that we guys come under the ambit of formal financial institutions. We take the loan from that. We don't take the loan from the money lenders. That is like not good. Clear? So this 50 years it has been working, but its share, if I talk about in the total credit, has only been 5%. अगर 100 loan जा रहा है तो सिर्फ 5% is taken only from the cooperative. So what does that indicate? A huge progress made by cooperative? No. So कहीं ना कहीं cooperatives, you can say, were kind of not unsuccessful in increasing the share of credit. Thereby, it was thought that let's bring in another category of institutions known as commercial banks. And with the enactment of SBI Act, commercial banks now started to take root in our country. And now you see, but commercial banks, आए तो SBI के बाद there were so many private sector banks also. But these commercial banks were just restricted to the class. That's why we said at that time that Indian economy was witnessing a class banking system, not mass banking, class banking. Second category of institutions आ गए commercial banks, but it was restricted mainly to the class rather than mass. अब हमें तो चाहिए ना कि जो लोन है, basically the economy at that time, you imagine the economy at that time is mainly an agricultural economy. The loan is required mainly by whom? By the farmers. But you are restricting your presence, the operational presence in the urban areas, giving the loan only to the high class people. Will it be able to achieve the objectives which we have thought? No. Thereby, one of the decision or one of the rationale for the decision taken in 1969 was, that is the nationalization, the decision to take the nationalization of 14 major commercial banks. Why? so that we change the nature of banking from class banking to mass banking. We expand the reach of commercial banks to the rural areas, to the remote areas. We expand the reach of that particular, like the banking system. So nationalization, you can consider this 1960 nationalization was considered as the first step of financial inclusion. First step of financial inclusion in the country. Or you can write it down, change the nature of banking from class banking to mass banking. So write it down, government nationalized a total number of 20 private sector banks, under the banking companies, in bracket acquisition and transfer of undertakings, in bracket acquisition and transfer of undertakings, bracket close, banking companies, in bracket acquisition and transfer of undertakings, bracket close, Act 1970. So total 20 banks got nationalized, 14 banks got nationalized in 1969, 6 banks got nationalized in 1980. And after this second phase of nationalization, more than 80% of the banks, if I talk about, they were under government ownership, more than 80%. Clear? So now again, if someone asks you, like why? Again, I told you the reason is to expand the reach. The commercial banks have started, there was no doubt about that, but still we were unable to expand the reach of the banking system to the remotest areas where the banking system is in high need. Clear? चलो, but 1969 में एक और major step लिया गया lead bank scheme. Now try to understand lead bank. अब देखो एक ही जगह पे, suppose we have the cooperative banks. Clear? Then the government commercial banks, then at the same time private commercial bank. They are providing service to a single region. Suppose this region में provide कर रहे हैं. Now all of them are giving loan to the same category of people, neglecting a particular category. तो एक ही category को आप ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा loan दे रहे हो. So don't you think that is like, I would say, the wastage of resources? Instead you could have given the loan to a more equitable by giving it to more people. Yes or no? So that is why the lead bank scheme was launched, where one bank would become like a leader of that particular area, and the area chosen was district, कि हर एक district का एक lead bank बनेगा, हर एक district का एक lead bank बनेगा, and this lead bank will be responsible for ensuring the activities of the banks goes to the desired area. कि अगर agriculture का target है तो agriculture पे focus करो, small farmers को देना तो small farmers को करो, like that. So lead bank is nothing but just like a monitor in the class, वैसा है. Clear? So just write it down about this lead bank scheme. The genesis of this scheme, can be traced to Gadgil study group. Gadgil study group. Next point. It was introduced which envisages the assignment of lead roles, to to individual banks, to individual banks, in bracket can be public sector or private sector, in bracket can be public sector or private sector, bracket close, for the districts allotted to them, for the district allotted to them, for the district allotted to them. Next point, district is chosen as the basic unit, district is chosen as the basic unit in terms of geographical area, in terms of geographical area. Next point, a bank having a relatively large number of branches, a bank having a relatively large number of branches in the rural areas of a given district, in the rural areas of a given district, and endowed with adequate financial and manpower resources, and endowed with adequate financial and manpower resources, has generally been entrusted with the lead responsibility, has generally been entrusted with the lead responsibility. Next point, the lead bank acts as a leader, the lead bank acts as a leader for coordinating the efforts of all credit institutions, for coordinating the efforts of all credit institutions, for coordinating the efforts of all credit institutions in the allotted district, in the allotted district, to increase the flow of credit, to increase the flow of credit to agriculture, small scale industries, and other activities included in the priority sector, and other activities included in the priority sector, in the rural and semi-urban areas, Next point, Gadgil Group has recommended, Gadgil Group, GADGIL, Gadgil Group has recommended area approach, in single quotes, write it down in single quotes, area approach that was adopted under the scheme, है ना, area approach है ना, that we are targeting now area. Let's focus on this particular district and this responsibility is given to a particular bank. It is your duty to ensure that the credit should go to these particular activities. That is why it is known as area approach based scheme. Clear? One more point. Again in single quotes you write it down. Service area approach. SAA. write it down in single quotes, service area approach in single quotes, comma, developed version of the area approach, developed version of the area approach was introduced under the lead bank scheme, was introduced under the lead bank scheme in 1989, in 1989 for the planned and orderly development, for the planned and orderly development of rural and semi-urban areas, for the planned and orderly development of the rural and semi-urban areas. ठीक है, चलो नेक्स्ट, लीड बैंक स्कीम इज डन, नेशनलाइजेशन इज डन, प्रायोरिटी सेक्टर लेंडिंग, आई विल कवर इट इन द वर्किंग ऑफ अ बैंक. नेक्स्ट, so you see till now we have seen two category of institutions, one is cooperative, second category of institution is commercial banks, but then it's a mix of both category of institution emerged known as RRBs, regional rural bank. If I talk about the regional rural banks, see regional rural banks, again I'll discuss, like I'll dictate the points, just try to understand this first. रीजनल रूरल बैंक्स, देखो अब एक इशू क्या आएगा, आप लोग को लगेगा कि जो एरिया अप्रोच है ना, क्वेश्चन पे अगर आ गया, दिस एरिया अप्रोच वाज अडॉप्टेड अंडर विच स्कीम, मेनी ऑफ यू माइट थिंक फ्रॉम दिस नेम इट वाज आरआरबीज, बट नो, इट वाज अंडर द लीड बैंक स्कीम. सो रीजनल रूरल बैंक्स इज अ कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ बोथ कोऑपरेटिव एंड commercial. Now, if I talk about that this is a mix of both, so they must be taking the advantages of both. See, what advantages a commercial bank generally have? Tell me.
Profit.
Sorry? Profit margin तो they make, but how they do make? Like, नहीं loans तो ठीक है, but something which distinguish commercial bank from cooperative in general, that makes them successful more than cooperative. नो ड्यूअल रेगुलेशन, यस, और आप उसको बोल सकते हो, बिल्कुल ये है प्रोफेशनलिज्म. प्रोफेशनलिज्म, सिंगल रेगुलेशन, इन शॉर्ट द गुड गवर्नेंस टाइप प्रिंसिपल. सो हियर आई एम राइटिंग, सी दिस इज द की एस्पेक्ट ऑफ commercial bank, that running in proper professionalism manner. It's not like, suppose if I have to give a loan to her, I'll be taking a due diligence about her credit assessment, whether she will be able to repay it back or not. और इस वर्ड को बोलते हैं credit worthiness, whether this person is worthy to give a credit or not, credit worthiness. ठीक है, so professionalism or sound governance principles. But what about the cooperatives? Cooperative must also be having some advantage over the commercial bank. कुछ तो एक इसका एडवांटेज है. नहीं, मैं आपको वो उसमें बात मत करूं. My idea is that in their functioning, this cooperative must be having some advantages over commercial banks. That is one, but more than that, now you see this cooperative banks have deep roots and connect with the rural people, which is not the case with the commercial banks. And why is it so? Because cooperative bane hi kaise hai? The people of a community, they have grouped together. They have come together so that they can extend loans to each other. So don't you think these banks will have more deeper roots, more connect with the people? Here, so RRBs, that's why it is said RRBs is a specialized mix of cooperative and commercial banks. Again, the purpose is to increase the flow of credit to the required sectors, especially the agriculture and allied sectors, and the other sectors included in the priority sector lending. आप ये सोचो, वो टाइम फ्रेम भी और दिमाग में रखो, 1976 में our whole economy, मतलब majorly our economy was an agrarian economy. So किसको सबसे ज्यादा क्रेडिट की जरूरत पड़ेगी? एग्रीकल्चर को. So regional rural banks, if it has been created at that time, it was mainly to provide the credit to the agriculture, rural sectors, or you can say the other sectors of the priority sector lending. ठीक है? बिल्कुल, वो कमर्शियल से, बिल्कुल ऐसा ही है. That is what. That's why I told you it's a mix. So write it down. One line about this. 2.23 points about this. RRBs were set up. RRBs were set up as government sponsored. As government sponsored, regional based rural lending institutions under the RRB Act, 1976, under the RRB Act 1976, based on the recommendations of the Narsimham Committee, based on the recommendations of Narsimham Committee. Next point. It combined the characteristics. It combined the characteristics of a cooperative in terms of the familiarity of the rural areas. It combined the characteristics of cooperative in terms of the familiarity. Combine the characteristics of cooperative in terms of the familiarity of the rural areas, and commercial banks in terms of professionalism, and the ability to mobilize, financial resources. Next point. The area of operation is limited to the area notified by the government, and it covers one or more districts, in a state. In bracket you write it down. RRBs can have urban branches. Next point. The equity of RRB is held by first subpoint central government. How much? 50%. So hyphen लिख देना 50%. अगर आपने पहली लाइन देखी होगी, मैंने पहली लाइन क्या बोली? It's a government sponsored institution, if you see. Clear? So first subpoint is central government, which holds 50% stake in any RRB. Second subpoint is state government. Hyphen 15%, 15%. Third is sponsor bank. स्पॉन्सर बैंक. सो आरआरबीज के पास हमेशा एक स्पॉन्सर बैंक होगा जो उसको सपोर्ट कर रहा होगा. क्लियर? हाइफन 35% इक्विटी. बट द नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन इज that so whether this sponsor bank can be a private bank or is it necessarily has to be a public bank. बताओ. It can be. So bracket में लिख लो sponsor के पास में can be private or public sector bank. Can be private or public sector bank. Next point. Now come out of this sub point. Next point. The key objective of RRB, the key objective of RRB is to provide credit, and other facilities to the small and marginal farmers, is to provide credit and other facilities to the small and marginal farmers, comma, agricultural laborers, comma, artisans, and small entrepreneurs in rural areas, Clear? Next point, आप लिख दो PSL requirement, PSL priority sector lending requirement. सिर्फ PSL requirement लिख लो आज के लिए. PSL requirement equals to 75%. PSL requirement equals to 75%. This we'll be discussing tomorrow. PSL क्या होता है? Last one more point. RRBs are regulated by the RBI. RRBs are regulated by the RBI and supervised by NABARD. ठीक है? So RRBs are regulated by the RBI and supervised by the NABARD. Next, now if you see after this there was NABARD. So NABARD will be covering under the agriculture. जब agriculture credit आपको उधर लिखना है तो लिख लो वाली cover under agriculture credit. NABARD को ना box में agriculture credit, because I'll talk about funds also, what funds NABARD manages. ठीक है? Then moving to the 1991. See 1991 it was very easy. अब आप देखो अभी का ट्रेंड क्या चल रहा था. Just try to understand what trend was going on. Trend, if you look at the trend, there was like growth of public sector banks, and not just only that, is new public sector banks were created, the private sector banks, they were also nationalized. And I told you one line that after the second phase of nationalization, more than 80% of the banking system was under government ownership. Yes or no? But tell me what will happen after 1991. See, 1991 LPG reforms took place. 1991 LPG reforms. Just to give you a simple idea, LPG reforms is nothing but simply our economy got liberalized. So that is known as liberalization of economy. Liberalize. You know, liberalization is nothing but simply the removal of barriers. Liberalization का कुछ और मीनिंग नहीं होता है, simply जो barriers होते हैं वो आप हटा दो. That is mean liberalization. That is simply giving freedom. अब इस केस में हम इकोनॉमी में बात करते हैं तो that means removing barriers for the enterprises, allowing the companies, you can come, you can bring more money, whatever you want. Yes or no? So liberalization is nothing but simply removal of barriers. Removal of barriers. Now, if these barriers, try to understand, is removed within the domestic, कि अगर मैं domestic अपने कंट्री में barriers हटा दूं, और I remove the barriers on the external front. I'll discuss both. जैसे डोमेस्टिक में क्या था, आप लोगों ने अभी वो पढ़ा नहीं होगा, IPR 1956 लाइसेंसिंग पढ़ लिया है, मतलब एक ब्रीफ आइडिया होगा ना, बट अदरवाइज दैट लाइसेंसिंग थिंग आई वाज ना टॉकिंग अबाउट. जैसे कंपनीज ना, देयर आर सर्टेन सेक्टर्स यू कैन से रिजर्व्ड फॉर द पब्लिक सेक्टर. दैट मींस ओनली एंड ओनली पब्लिक सेक्टर कैन अंडरटेक द प्रोडक्शन इन दोज सेक्टर. अगर इंडस्ट्रीज होंगी तो सिर्फ पब्लिक सेक्टर होंगी. तो दैट वाज क्लियरली डिफाइंड इन IPR 1956 करके एक पॉलिसी है, उसमें शेड्यूल ए. That means the sectors were reserved for the public sector to undertake. Private sector is not allowed. तो ये बैरियर नहीं है, प्राइवेट सेक्टर को आप रोक रहे हो. This is called a barrier. Yes or no? So now if I say, if I remove this barrier, today you see private sector is allowed in almost all the sectors except in two sectors. Private sector is allowed in undertake industrial production in all the sector except in two areas. Defense. Atomic energy one, defense में तो FDI allowed है हमारा, that is I think also 74%. Defense, हाँ 76 होगा, ये 70 प्लस में. Second is railway operation, railway transport, not operation, railway basically transport. Railway infrastructure has been given to the private sector that you can develop. तभी तो आप देखो रानी कमलापति से ना जो आपका बना है, और भी अदर रेलवे स्टेशन, दे आर बिल्ट अंडर PPP मोड. न्यू दिल्ली का है, न्यू दिल्ली का बनने वाला है रीडेवलपमेंट जो प्लान, दैट इज अगेन अंडर PPP मोड. सो रेलवे इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को आपने कर दिया ओपन, बट रेलवे ट्रांसपोर्ट अभी नहीं किया. सो माय पॉइंट इज दैट लिबरलाइजेशन सिंपली मींस रिमूवल ऑफ बैरियर्स. जो आपने बैरियर्स लगा के रखे ना कि प्राइवेट सेक्टर ये नहीं कर सकता, दिस दे कांट डू, or if they hire more than 100 workers, they are not allowed to undertake hire and fire policy. एक टाइम पे ये हुआ करता था, like if the industry have 100 plus workers, they cannot undertake hire and fire policy. जो आप देख रहे हो अभी फेसबुक, मेटा इन सब में ना, या गूगल में, माइक्रोसॉफ्ट में, they are like firing off 10,000 employees done, 12,000 you go. और जब चाहिए थे हायर करते. दिस इज नोन एज हायर एंड फायर पॉलिसी. बट इन इंडिया इट कुड नॉट बी डन. व्हाई? क्योंकि एक्ट थी एक which said that if an industry have 100 more workers, they cannot undertake this hire and fire policy. They have to obtain the government permission. आ गया barrier. They have to obtain the government permission to fire the people. तो एक barrier है कि नहीं है ये? So this liberalization, what it did, it removed the barriers. When it removed the barriers within the domestic part, it lead to the privatization. It encouraged the privatization. It encouraged the privatization. But at the same time, when it removed the external barriers जैसे क्या होते हैं? मानो तुम्हें हार्ले डेविडसन चाहिए, लेकिन टैरिफ है उस पे 100% से प्लस. Yes or no? या टेस्ला आना चाह रहा है, बट उसमें आप बैरियर्स लगाए जा रहे हो. So आप मुझे एक बताओ, when you put the external barriers, especially if I talk about tariff, restricting or you restricting the amount of the commodities which you can import, so क्या होगा? Will I be able to exchange the trade, or which will I be able to exchange goods and service with the other country? No. Will I be able to exchange the capital? No. Today तो you see foreign investments are coming, stock market is booming. The foreign investment is coming, investing in the Indian stock market, and you see there the stock market today. But earlier you could not see that before 1991 because there were barriers. We were controlling the capital, that no capital will be allowed. अच्छा, आपका external sector भी छूटा हुआ, I have to cover that also. I forgot to mention that in the beginning. Clear? So externally, the barriers in the external, if you remove that barriers, what will happen? More and more people will go in the other places. There will be more movement of people across the countries. More trade will happen or not. And more, another last thing is capital. There will be capital inflow and outflow. Greater capital inflow and outflow, which will lead to globalization. And that's why it is known as LPG reforms. इसीलिए साइड में बोलते हैं LPG reforms is nothing but simply the liberalization of economy which also resulted into privatization and globalization. That's why we call it together. अब आप मुझे बताओ 1991 में what impact LPG reforms would have created on the banking system? Think from your perspective. First, you just have to say yes or no. First, will the private sector banks, will it be encouraged now to come and set up their institutions in our country? Yes, that is known as entry of new private sector banks. More new private sector banks are allowed. Second, now the interest rate, जैसे मैं आपको बताऊं, earlier the interest rates were controlled by the RBI, that you have to give the loans at this rate. That were controlled by the RBI. But now after the LPG reforms, don't you think it will be deregulated? That deregulated means it will be now up to the bank. Whatever lending rate you want to do, it's up to you. Deregulation, yes. कि अब आपके ऊपर है. पहले RBI ना kind of like put a good condition, good control over the banks over the banks lending rate. But after the LPG, as I told you, removal of barriers, like giving them more freedom to run their own enterprise. ठीक है? So banking system से अब इसके 1991 impacted the banking system significantly. Focused on three things जो मैं आपको सिर्फ बता दे रहा हूं. One is great entry of private sector bank, that is entry of new private sector bank. Second, deregulation of interest rate, deregulation. And third, focus, it was suggested, focus towards the more sectors which are promoting growth, which you can say service sectors. This third point we'll be discussing in agriculture in detail. That means अब 1991 के बाद आप देखना, it was mainly service sector that was propelling the economy. Service sector. So अब ये बोला गया यार, if service sector is propelling the economy, why are you giving 40% loans to the priority sector? तो कल priority sector होने तो you will understand this better. So then why are you giving loans to this? You should divert the loans towards the service sector. Why are you putting a restriction on the banks to give minimum percentage of loan to this priority sectors? Priority sector is nothing like agriculture, MSME. क्यों? Why are you putting this? हम तो liberalization होना चाहिए ना. ठीक है? So third is kind of giving loans to those sectors which is propelling the economy. So this was like the three major impact you could see on the banking system. Major, yes.
I often get confused. What would the bank generally do in such a case? Would they reduce the rates to attract the investors, or would they increase the rates so that they get better returns?
See, again, as I told you, it is dependent upon the objective which they want to seek at that time. It is now up to their interest. Like whatever they feel that okay, we have more capital, so they would reduce it. And if they feel that no, I don't have the capital, I need to raise the capital, they would try to raise the deposit rate. It is not like you can say that there is single formula like for this. It is up to at that time. जैसे मैं आपको एक बात बताता हूँ और बताता हूँ. अभी demonetization मतलब kind of demonetization of 2000 notes happened. Yes or no? So people had to rush to the banks to exchange their notes. Now when they had to go to the bank to exchange their notes or simply put it in the banking system, tell me banking system capital, will it has increased or not? Increased? Now at this point of time, will the banks increase the lending rate or reduce the lending rate? I've tried to understand this. See, this demonetization, kind of demonetization has done by the government. Clear? Where it says that this 2000 notes will not be continued till after this particular date, and you have to exchange, you have been given 6-7 months to exchange it with the banking system. Clear? आप लोगों के पास भी होंगे, कहीं के पास होंगे. They went to the bank and बैंक के पास deposit करवा दिए. जितने उन्होंने exchange किया, generally क्या होता है, we put it in the bank itself. Now tell me the bank's capital, has it increased or not? Capital, bank has more money or not? Yes. And that bank's capital has mobilized, has it reduced the deposit rate for this? Or sorry, has it increased the deposit rate for this? No. Bank के पास लेकिन पैसा आ गया. Now you see, bank have more money. Bank has बढ़िया सा पैसा है. ठीक है. Now do you think what will bank do? Will they increase the deposit rate or will they reduce the lending rate? Why reduce?
You already have supply
Yes, we already have supply of money. Why we need to deposit rate? Why do we need to know? We have already supply of money. तो पहले मेरे पे जब सप्लाई है तो मैं इनको तो निकालूं, इनको तो लोन दूं. Then only I'll mobilize again to give the loans. But when I have already high supply, why should I increase the deposit rate? Because deposit rate बढ़ते मेरा lending rate भी बढ़ेगा. And when lending rate increase, my lending will decrease. तो इसीलिए वो उस टाइम के ऑब्जेक्टिव पे ना वो डिपेंड करता है. It's not like uniformly it will happen kind of a thing. Clear? Now after this 1991, see there are two things that you now see is a small finance bank and payment bank. Now why these small finance bank and payment bank came into picture? A small finance bank versus payment bank, yes or no? A small finance bank versus payment bank. These were the new kind of banks that came into existence in 2015. Now here I just want to tell you one concept before I talk about this is, these banks are called niche banks or differentiated banks. Just a small like एक categorization दिया हुआ है, so that even if this word is asked or given in the examination, you should not get confused. Niche or differentiated. See, if I talk about commercial banks, suppose SBI ले लो or HDFC ले लो. Now these commercial banks, you see, they undertake both kind of activities. One is taking loans and second is taking deposits, second giving loans, and they both give equal importance to both functions. But these banks, small finance bank and payment banks, have been created with a singular purpose, with a certain purpose, or with a niche, you can say, purpose, rather than undertaking all the functions of bank. So that's why these banks are called niche or differentiated, which means these banks have been established, these banks have been created to achieve a particular purpose, not just like another bank. It's not the purpose that is okay, another just like another bank. No, purpose is to achieve a particular purpose. Clear? That's why these are niche banks. Now what is the purpose? I'll talk about that, but before that, these both the banks are set up based on the recommendations of which committee? Sorry, Nachiket More committee. Based on the recommendations of Nachiket More committee. अब मैं आपको एक छोटा सा आइडिया देता हूं पहले, बिफोर आई आस्क यू टू राइट. अब इशू क्या है? इशू यही है, हाउ टू प्रमोट फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन. अब फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन के लिए देयर आर सर्टेन थिंग्स दैट इज रिक्वायर्ड. वन, द पर्सन शुड बी हैविंग अ बेसिक पॉइंट, बेसिक सेविंग्स अकाउंट वेयर दे कैन पुट देयर मनी. That is one basic, first very basic feature of the financial inclusion, that a person should have a basic account. But it is not all that. Apart from that, a person should be eligible, should be getting the formal loans instead of getting the informal loans. That is another aspect of financial inclusion. Apart from that, access to insurance and the other investment also. Clear? So financial inclusion have these four features: access to basic saving account, access to loan, access to investment and access to insurance. These are four features. अब ये जो banks create गए हैं दो, ये they are created with a very singular purpose. Like if I talk about payment banks, payment banks are created with a purpose of generating the or giving the people an option to put their money into these accounts. Payment banks are created, I'll dictate each and every point, don't worry. Try to understand, payment banks are created with an objective of giving them an option where they can put their money into these accounts, and these accounts can be used for the remittances by the migrant workers. जैसे migrant workers यहाँ पे है दिल्ली में, they have to transfer the money to their family. Now you see, for that sometimes they have to go to the SBI and the other banks where they have accounts. That takes lot of their effort. काफी line भी होती है, plus they don't know even the procedural issues also. So that is difficult for them to access this facility. So it was envisaged that payment banks with the help of technology will help these people, especially the people of migrant workers, to create an option to put their money into these accounts, and that can be used for the migration, or you can say remittances to back to their homes, to transfer the remittances back to their homes. So payment bank का ये purpose है, which means sir, are you saying that payment bank cannot undertake lending? Yes, payment bank cannot undertake lending, उसका purpose ही नहीं है. अब आप मुझे एक बात बताओ, अगर मैं आपसे कंसेप्ट पूछूं पेमेंट बैंक कांट अंडरटेक लेंडिंग, टेल मी, कैन द पेमेंट बैंक इशू द क्रेडिट कार्ड? नो. क्यों? बिकॉज क्रेडिट कार्ड इज ऑल्सो व्हाट? अ टाइप ऑफ लोन बीन गिवन. क्लियर? तो ये बेसिक पहले आपको समझना चाहिए. ऑन द कॉन्ट्ररी, इफ आई टॉक अबाउट द स्मॉल फाइनेंस बैंक, स्मॉल फाइनेंस बैंक्स का ये पर्पज है that in the society there are very unserved section and underserved section. Unserved and underserved society means that these people who don't get loan from the big commercial banks, who mainly prefer to give a loan to the class people, whatever. So there in the society there are unserved, underserved section. A small finance bank is created with an objective to provide loans mainly to these sections of society. Unserved and underserved, which are like micro, small enterprises, small marginal farmers, like those. So they have been created with that particular purpose. लेकिन अब लोन देने के लिए आपको पैसा डिपॉजिट चाहिए नहीं चाहिए? So yes, small finance bank have both objectives, like have both functions, mobilize deposit and giving the loan. But why it is called a niche bank? Because it is created with a purpose to give loans to these people. Underserved and unserved section, not to all the sections. अगर आप बोलोगे कि चलो स्मॉल फाइनेंस बैंक से लोन ले, शायद आपको नहीं मिले. ऑन दी अदर हैंड कमर्शियल बैंक से शायद आपको मिल जाए. ठीक है? सो ये दोनों का जब पर्पस क्लियर है ना, देन वी विल टॉक अबाउट द पॉइंट्स. यू राइट डाउन द पॉइंट्स इन द डिफरेंस बेस्ड मैनर. सो व्हाट यू हैव टू डू, यू हैव टू मेक अ टेबल, make two columns, a small finance bank and payment banks. Small finance bank and payment bank, like this. Paytm ना payment bank. अब आप मुझे एक बात, payment bank, Paytm is a payment bank. अब आप मुझे एयरटेल का जो है एयरटेल पेमेंट बैंक, मुझे आप एक चलो बात बताओ, लॉजिकली व्हाट डू यू थिंक, आउट ऑफ दीज टू, एज पर योर नॉलेज राइट नाउ, out of these two, which is likely to be more profitable for the entity? Small finance bank or payment bank? बताओ. Payment bank या small? Small finance banks, payment bank के पास कर क्या रहा है वो तो 4% पे डिपॉजिट ले रहा है बस, लेकिन लोन दे रहा है? No. I'll tell you one condition that where they have to put the money. अब उसके पास पैसा तो आ गया, now they can't give the loan, which gives them more profit. So what they have to do, that I'll tell you, they have to invest the money in the government securities. 75% of the money they mobilize, they have to invest in the government securities. तो ये सब लिखेंगे, ठीक है? बट आप इसीलिए देखो, ये मैं क्यों बता रहा हूं, ये सब ना आपकी बेसिक अंडरस्टैंडिंग के लिए. you'll realize कि तभी पेमेंट बैंक शट डाउन हो रहे हैं, because no profitability, they can't undertake lending. That's why the RBI have given the option that payment bank can transition to small finance bank. They can transition means they can get themselves registered as a small finance bank. ऐसा बोला गया. ये तो एज अ न्यूज आइटम टाइप से है, ठीक है? सो राइट इट डाउन. फर्स्ट पॉइंट अंडर स्मॉल फाइनेंस बैंक, promote financial inclusion by the provision of saving vehicles. Promote financial inclusion by the provision of saving vehicle and the supply of credit and the supply provision of saving vehicle. Saving vehicle is nothing but simply saving provision. नहीं होता, saving account open कर लो, that is saving vehicle. Provision of saving vehicle by the provision of saving account लिख लो, by the provision of saving account and the supply of credit to small business units, comma small and marginal farmers, comma micro and small enterprises, and other unorganized sector entities, पेमेंट बैंक्स में लिखो फर्स्ट पॉइंट, प्रमोट फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन by providing a small saving account and payment or remittance services, by promoting a small saving account and payment or remittance services to migrant labor, comma low income households, comma small businesses and other unorganized sector entities, ठीक है. सेकेंड पॉइंट अंडर स्मॉल फाइनेंस बैंक, मिनिमम पेड अप इक्विटी कैपिटल इज रुपीज 200 करोड़ फॉर स्मॉल फाइनेंस बैंक. पहले 100 करोड़ थी, फिर वो बढ़ के 200 कर दी. फॉर पेमेंट बैंक minimum paid up equity capital is rupees 100 crore. Minimum paid up equity capital is rupees 100 crore. Next point, under small finance bank, extend 75% of loans to priority sector. Extend 75% of loans to priority sector. Payment banks में can't undertake lending activities. Small finance banks में can accept both demand and time deposits. Payment banks में can accept only demand deposits. So even in the deposits, it can only accept demand deposits in bracket up to rupees 2 lakh. Next point, in a small finance bank, can issue both debit card and credit card. Payment banks में can only issue debit card, but can't issue credit card. Can only issue debit card but can't issue credit card. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, स्मॉल फाइनेंस बैंक्स में मेंटेन सीआरआर एंड एसएलआर रिक्वायरमेंट, maintain CRR and SLR requirement just like any other commercial bank. Maintain CRR and SLR requirement just like any other commercial bank. ठीक है, और वहां पे लिखो पेमेंट बैंक्स में मेंटेन CRR, maintain CRR but invest 75% of the deposits, but invest 75% of the deposits in SLR eligible G-Secs, but invest minimum 75% of deposits in SLR eligible G-Secs and 25% of deposits and 25% of deposits with other bank, with other bank. ठीक है, लास्ट पॉइंट एक और लिख लो, स्मॉल फाइनेंस बैंक कैन बी कन्वर्टेड टू फुल फ्लेज्ड बैंक. स्मॉल फाइनेंस बैंक कैन बी कन्वर्टेड टू फुल फ्लेज्ड बैंक. एंड लास्ट पेमेंट बैंक में लिख लो, पेमेंट बैंक कैन फंक्शन एज, पेमेंट बैंक कैन फंक्शन एज a business correspondent of another bank. Payment bank can function as business correspondent of another bank. ठीक है, चलो लास्ट कैटेगरी ऑफ बैंक इज न्यू बैंक्स, जो आजकल रिसेंट है, NEO, न्यू बैंक्स. राइट इट डाउन, न्यू, NEO, न्यू बैंक्स. हैव यू गाइस हर्ड ऑफ दिस जुपिटर कार्ड, जुपिटर अकाउंट? जुपिटर ऐप नहीं सुनी? इतनी ऐड आती है. रेजर पे एक्स है ना. तो बेसिकली यू मस्ट बी सीइंग दिस वेरियस कंपनीज ऑफरिंग दिस कार्ड, मेटल कार्ड, वन मेटल कार्ड. सी व्हाट आर दीज बैंक्स? दीज बैंक्स आर द न्यू बैंक्स. न्यू बैंक्स मीन्स दैट दीज बैंक्स, first of all, they are not actually bank which are registered, or not, I would say they have got the complete permission from the RBI to function as a bank. Why? Because they are completely digital. New banks are those banks, try to understand, I'll dictate, don't write right now. New banks are those banks which are completely digital and have no physical presence at all. No physical presence. Now RBI has a rule that if any bank don't have physical presence, you cannot get a banking license from me. You cannot get a banking license from me. So then why is this bank known as new bank? These new banks, they don't get a banking license from the RBI, but they are providing banking services and it is supported by the other bank. Supported by the other bank. They are not, again I am telling you, they don't have received a banking license from the RBI. They are supported by the other bank. तो इसीलिए, because the RBI have a simple rule that if a bank is not having any physical branches, I will not give, as of now, it can be changed later, as of now I cannot give a license to them. So इसीलिए इसको new, NEO banks. ठीक है, न्यू बैंक्स की यही मीनिंग है और कुछ भी नहीं. तो कभी भी आप सपोज आपको किसी ने बोला जुपिटर कार्ड या वन कार्ड, they will always say that our card is supported by this bank. Suppose I was opening the account for my company, Razor Pay X, current account. So they are supported by the other company. They are not, because Razor Pay X is like completely online. They have not received. भाई बैंक आप जितना भी open account कर लो, current account, but they have not received. Again, I am telling you, a banking license. So thereby they has to be supported by the another bank, which has received a banking license from the RBI. ठीक है, सो ये 3-4 लाइनें लिख लो न्यू बैंक के बारे में. इट इज अ काइंड ऑफ डिजिटल बैंक. इट इज अ काइंड ऑफ डिजिटल बैंक without any branches. It is a kind of digital bank without any branches. Rather than being physically present at a specific location, it is entirely online. Next point. These firms don't have a bank license of their own. They don't have a bank license of their own, but rely on bank partners to offer licensed services. In bracket you can write it down, as RBI doesn't allow banks to be 100% digital yet. Are you getting the point? As RBI doesn't allow banks to be 100% digital yet. Clear? Example, Jupiter, Razorpay X, etc. Especially the one you see on the online, वो आपको ज़्यादातर यही दिखेंगे. ठीक है? So that's it guys for our first part of the banking. Clear? Tomorrow we'll be talking about the working of a bank. Where we'll be talking about PSL norms, minimum lending rate and all that stuff. So that's it. Take care guys. Study well. All the best.